All right, everybody, I guess we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Mandy Smith from Mothers Up Front in Lexington. And this is our monthly climate coffee break where you can take action on climate change in just 30 minutes. So I'm going to share my screen here with you. And we will get started. See. So today, we are very lucky to have Kirsty Pecci with us from Conservation Law Foundation's Zero Waste project. And she is going to explain to us why we so desperately need to update the Massachusetts bottle bill and how we can take action to make sure that new bill gets passed. And just a couple of quick notes. It's great if you guys can all stay on mute and until you're ready to talk. We will have a little question and answer period at the end. But until then, it'd be great to stay muted. And I wanted to let you know that this is being recorded. So if you don't want to be seen, you can just turn off your video camera. Okay, so today our guest is Kirsty Pecci, Director of the Conservation Law Foundation Zero Waste Project. In addition to being the director of that project, she's also the senior attorney at the Conservation Law Foundation, where she works to encourage waste reduction and oppose the expansion of landfill and incinerator capacity. Kirsty is part of the Zero Waste Boston Coalition, which advocates for zero waste solutions such as reuse, recycling, redesign, and composting anaerobic digestion in the city of Boston. She also founded the Central Massachusetts group Residents for Alternative Trash Solutions to oppose a regional landfill expansion and promote zero waste. A graduate of Boston College Law School and Harvard University, she lives in Sturbridge, Massachusetts. Thank you so much for being with us today, Kirsty.
It's my pleasure, Mandy. Thank you so much.
Let me just, sorry. Do you want to go ahead and share, Laura?
Fantastic. So with me today is Lauren Fernandez, our Conservation Law Foundation's Zero Waste Policy Analyst. We're very, very happy to be here, and we have news. Just yesterday, the TUE Committee, Telecommunications, Utilities, and Electricity, and Energy, TUE, they voted yesterday to favorably move the bottle bill forward. They reported favorably on the bottle bill. The deadline for this is February 2nd to either report or not report on bills. Yes, big hand of applause. I'm so excited that this has happened. I was doing some research today. I don't have a definitive answer, but I can't remember. And I've been working on this, on the bottle bill in one way, form or another as a volunteer in different organizations, et cetera, since about 2009, 2010. And I double checked today. I can't find a time when it was reported favorably out of committee. In 2011, it passed the Senate as part of the jobs bill. And in 2013, it passed the Senate as part of the budget. But the TUE committee has not favorably reported out on this bill in the last 10 years. So really exciting, really excellent. And everybody has put a lot of work into this. I want to thank Mothers Out Front because the grassroots piece of this is always crucial, as we'll talk about today. Lauren, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Great. So the bill that we're talking about that TUE made a favorable recommendation on is the Senator Green bill S2149. It is identical to the House bill 3289. So we're talking about the same language that was presented to them. Next, please, Lauren. And the bill, what it does is very, just remind you, the current bottle bill only covers beer, soda, and malt beverage containers, and there's a 5-cent deposit fee on it, meaning that the customer, when they purchase the drink, the beverage, pays the 5 cents, and then they get it back if they return it. our return rate in Massachusetts for these containers has dipped below 50% for the first time. The nickel is not worth what it used to be. And we're not covering enough containers. And we know that bottle bill containers get recycled. Almost all of them get recycled. Whereas curbside containers do not necessarily get recycled. In fact, the glass containers, for instance, those bottles are being ground up and used as landfill cover or road bed. So the bottle bill is superior in a lot of different ways. What this bill does is raises the deposit from 5 cents to 10 cents, expands the type of containers included, and this will increase the recycling rates. The expansion of the containers, it includes glass, plastic, and aluminum beverage containers, all beverage containers, up to 3 liters. It would include nips, wine and liquor, water, iced tea, sports drink, and juices. And one clever thing that the bill does, which I can't take credit for, but this is something we found and recommended as language, is that any new beverage that's created would be included too. So if there's some new kombucha or some nonsense that comes out with that the kids are drinking that doesn't exist right now, that will be covered by this bill too. Really important because, of course, we defined in the past, we defined it very specifically, and that's why we're kind of in the mess we're in with these containers. So this would include all beverage containers, excluding dairy, excluding formula, excluding medicine, and excluding very, very small companies. For instance, if there was a farmer's market where they sold a certain kind of juice. Next, Lauren, please. And so what we want to talk about is how to take action. And we're lucky enough to have Rep. Sokola on today. And we spoke earlier about this bill. As you may know, Rep. Sokola is the architect of the Zero Waste Caucus at the State House, which started about 1.5 years ago. I'd love to hear from her, if she doesn't mind, this morning about why it's so important we all take action now and the best ways to target that grassroots action. So if Rep. Sokola doesn't mind, I'd love to hear from you right now.
Thanks, Kirsty. I didn't realize, I'm glad to be able to give some input, and more importantly, want to give a huge kudos to you for all your work on this. We would not be where we are at today without Kirsty and Lauren, and all of the grassroots as well. It's really just the dogged perseverance by the staff at CLF, specifically Kirsty and Lauren, has made a tremendous difference. So anyway, I'm glad you're all here. Kirsty mentioned that all bills have to be reported out by February 2nd, and we are ahead of the game in that it's been reported out favorably, and that is a really sea change from past sessions. But that doesn't mean that the chair of the TUE has the bandwidth to be able to make this one of his priorities, both on the House side and the Senate. So it's Senator Barrett on the Senate side. We know this is important to him, but it's also Chairman Roy on the House side. And they are juggling a series of massive bills related to energy and utilities. And, they have only so many months left before this session concludes. And between now and the end of session, we also have to do a budget. So that becomes all consuming for these chairs that have to look at their policy areas and look at the budget that impacts the policy focus of their chairmanship. So making sure it's one of their top priorities. It's one of the handful of small bills that they want to get done this session is what the grassroots needs to help us do now. So that means writing to leadership. Speaker Mariano, Senate President Spilka, the chairs, again, that were just mentioned, and making sure that we want to move it forward as badly as you all want us to move it forward, because it's just a matter of competing resources for their time and energy. And unfortunately, that's why sometimes bills that do get reported out favorably don't actually get it across the finish line. And making sure the public understands, helping us with the public, because the closer the bill gets as it moves, the more the public starts to tune in, and we're going to start to see opposition at this stage, right? We may not have seen much opposition at all, but all of a sudden, the general public's going to come out and be upset about the increased fees, which we have not heard to date in this discussion and the debate, because it hasn't been real enough for people to pay attention and worry. So again, all of your efforts at the grassroots really matter at this pivotal stage, and I really appreciate the participation and attendance of the mothers out front, and the Climate Action Network, the LexCan, and all the other advocates that are on this call. Thank you.
I I think that says it just perfectly. We have to get this bill, as the rep was just saying, we have to get this bill through Ways and Means, which should be okay. But then we need it to be brought for a vote before the Senate. In other words, the Senate president has to say, all right, we're going to vote on this. And we need it to be brought for a vote before the House. And as I said earlier, a couple different times it's passed the Senate through different being attached to different bills. It has never been brought for a vote in the House. So again, we need to put the pressure on to make those things happen. And then we're going to have to overcome the governor's potential opposition. I'm hoping that the governor will not veto this bill, but again, that hope isn't going to get much done. We need to make sure that we get the public's voice loud and centered and clearly telling the leadership and the governor's office that we need to get this done. So first step is reaching back out to leadership, as the rep just said. We need to make sure that the TUE chairs, Chair Roy and Chair Barrett, hear loud and clear, fantastic job. Now we need to get this voted on. And the same with the Speaker of the House, Mariano, and the President of the Senate, Spilka. So next slide, please. I think we've got and here are some talking points just to ground you, which a lot of you are already very well versed in this and have been working on this for as long as I have. Recycling costs right now are way too high for cities and towns, especially towns that have curbside recycling. Millions of plastic bottles are being landfilled and incinerated, absolutely true. Glass bottles are not being recycled in Massachusetts. That's right from Mass DEP. And then, and that's just being ground up for roadbed and landfill cover. So those are kind of the talking points to understand. And then Mandy has just put in the chat each of the email addresses and phone numbers. Next slide, please, Lauren. And so here we are with the two legislators, the Speaker and the Senate President. And as I said, they're also in the chat if you can get to that easily. So why don't we leave it right there? And then also Mandy has just put actual text that you can cut and paste right into the email. Do folks have any, oh, go ahead, Mandy.
No, go ahead, Kirsty, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure folks didn't have questions on the policy or anything like that first before they actually started tearing up the phone lines and sending emails out.
Kirsty, while people are thinking of their questions, if I could just add that as a legislator, we look more closely at the emails that we get from constituents that are not form letters. And so if you're far better off to send 2 sentences saying, this matters to me, it's critically important, than it is to send a long form letter. So if you have the time and the ability to put your own thoughts down, you could still cut and paste from the form letters, but when it's not a form letter, we take it more seriously.
I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. But you can use this, but then add a sentence at the end or beginning, for instance, to it.
Yep. So let's.
Oh, I'm sorry,
ahead.
Mandy. Could you just say where the main sources of opposition are to this bill?
Absolutely. So I would put them in 3 categories. The first category is the beverage companies. The beverage companies don't pay for that 5-cent or 10-cent deposit, but they do pay for what's called a handling fee. And that's what moves the bottles and cans through the system to get them from the retailer or the redemption center to the recycling companies. So the beverage companies don't want to pay for that, and they've been opposed to this for a long time. They're changing their tune somewhat because of the plastic problem and the backlash they've gotten. And as Rep. Sikola said, they did not show up at the hearing on this, which is a first. The way they're opposing it now is saying, oh, don't do a bottle bill, don't improve the bottle bill, just do EPR for packaging and include it there, which doesn't work for bottles and cans. So we're seeing different kinds of opposition from them, and it's softened a lot, Susan, but that's the first category is beverage companies. So Coke, Pepsi, Nestle, our usual friends. The second category is waste management, Casella, Wheelabraid, or Caventa, the waste companies. The waste companies also handle the sorting of recycling. They get paid by the ton for the materials they pick up curbside. So they don't want that tonnage to decrease. If we got the glass out of the curbside, for instance, they'd lose a lot of money. And so they don't want that to happen. And a lot of these materials are ending up in landfills and incinerators, and they're happy to burn and bury them. That's what they get paid by the ton. So that's another piece. The waste companies are always going to be against this. And that's why we see Mass Recycle, which is run by the waste companies. It's a coalition run by the waste companies. They're opposed to these bills always. And then finally, the last category is retailers don't really want to deal with this. Return to retail is a pain in the neck for a liquor store or for a grocery store. However, it really works. It needs to be done. And we've brought retailers along on a lot of these issues, but we might see some pretty vehement opposition from them, honestly. But on the other side, we have the cities and towns working with us. MMA, Mass Municipal Association, and MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, have both endorsed these bills, and lots of cities and towns are with us on this. So, that's kind of where it's at, Susan.
Kirsty,
That's
can I
true.
ask a
That's true.
question? Kirsty?
Of course.
It's Ann.
Hey, Ann.
I just need, maybe this is a silly question, but I'm anticipating what people are going to ask, and you kind of just answered it, but I need more clarification. When the first bullet point was that recycling costs are way too high. So adding all of these other items to the recycling stream, how would that bring the cost down? So I'm just anticipating people asking, well, if the recycling costs are way too high now, how will this help?
So right now, if you have a bottle of wine and you drink it, right, or a water bottle or anything other than soda and beer, pretty much, if you have that bottle or can, you're putting it in your curbside or you're putting it in your trash. If you've got a curbside system. Curbside is paid by the ton. And so if we have a bottle bill, then people will not put it in their curbside system, in their bin or in their trash. Instead, Ann, they go to the grocery store that they bought the stuff from and just put it in a reverse vending machine and get their money back. And if it goes to 10 cents, we find that people bring the bottles and cans back for 10 cents. They might not bother for 5 cents, but in today's economy, they will bother. We've seen this in Oregon and Michigan. They will bother for 10 cents. So those materials will no longer be in your trash or in your curbside recycling. So if a city, say a Revere or Boston or Worcester or Springfield, all of those communities that have curbside will be paying less. They'll have less tons of recycling and less tons of trash to pay for. So they'll save money from the city at the city and town level, especially taking that heavy glass out of the system.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. Thanks.
I just wanted to ask quickly, is everybody having an easy enough time getting their letters, their emails written? Okay, Marcia.
Oh,
Wait,
you're mute, Marcia.
Unmute, Marcia.
I on the topic of the glass containers, when we return them in the machine, they still break. Are there any, but that's still, you're collecting them, you're getting them out of curbside. Are there any plans to think about systems for actually reuse in glass?
So two things. One, really good question, Marcia. Reuse, refillables is where we want to go. Like, that's true circularity, right? And it takes a lot less energy to collect a wine bottle or a beer bottle or any bottle, rinse it out and then fill it again than it does to recycle it, and especially than it does to make it out of virgin materials. And glass is the way to go because plastic is nasty and polluting in every stage, and we want to get away from plastics whenever we can. And remember, your aluminum cans rely on plastic, so glass is the way to go. So that is the absolute ultimate that we want to push for. But we know you can't do that unless you have a good, strong bottle bill. So if I had my druthers, this bill would already have it in it. I mean, that would be my ideal. But this is the definite necessary first step to get there. When we get to, we say around 90% redemption and recycling of bottles and cans through deposit return systems, which 10 cents should get us there. If we do that for most containers, then it becomes practicable and efficient and economical for beverage companies to actually start refill systems. So that's like, if we can get this done, this is a necessary step to get us there. Maine's got a really good bottle bill that includes just about everything. we're working with them to try and do some pilots on refill for that reason.
Karen?
Hi, one of the obstacles that I have read about is how to collect all these, because, you know, do I have to go to my liquor store to deposit the liquor bottles, the grocery store to deposit others, the kombucha store to do others? And I've heard of an innovative approach in Oregon where they have centralized ones, and you just bring a huge bag to the recycling center and you get a credit. And it just goes on your card as a credit. Has anyone in Massachusetts or Maine approached that kind of collection? Because I can see this as being an obstacle for people.
So that's a really good question. And we hear a lot of times, do we want to do what Oregon did? So what Karen's talking about is return to retail. In other words, you bought it there, you can bring it back there, versus centralized redemption centers where you can bring all your bottles and cans. Some retailers in Massachusetts will take anything, even if they didn't sell it to you. It depends on the retailer, but there are some limitations sometimes. Here's the thing. We find that for folks who don't have cars, especially, return to retail is crucial, because if you were able to get there to purchase the beverage, you're able to get back there to return it and to purchase your next beverage. So from an equity position, we always want to have return to retail. And we also find that people just go to their grocery store and their liquor store with regularity and find a way to do that so that we get higher rates of return for that. That being said, redemption centers are really crucial to making this happen, and we want redemption centers as well. And what we've seen, Karen, in other places is that when you have enough containers, in other words, all these beverage containers, and you've got enough rates of return, so instead of 5 cents getting you less than 50% return rates, you're getting to 90% return, and that many more containers they can count on. And as long as you have a good handling fee, which Massachusetts does, it's profitable to create those redemption centers like they have in Oregon, as well as the return to retail. So we're hoping that this actually galvanizes more investment in regional retail centers like that too. And we do have some redemption centers like that in Massachusetts already. So that is something that I think this bill would encourage, both more return to retail and more redemption centers. One thing I will say too, that I just can't help but make sure people understand, the beverage industry would like to just see redemption centers, because that's very efficient for them. In other words, one big collection place regionally, but you don't get as high a rate of return. In other words, all the bottles and cans don't come back to you when you just have redemption centers, because those people without cars or who don't happen to live near the redemption center don't do it. So we really want to see both. And that's really the problem that the Oregon system has, is that they don't have the return to retail element. And so that's actually going to mean that will cap how well the system can work. It'll be, what they do will be more efficient, but they won't necessarily get it. And then lastly, it's cheaper to go back to return to retail. The system is actually easier to run and cheaper for the system as a whole. So actually, that's another piece of this moving forward.
I see
So I guess all of the above, Karen, we want all of it.
I see another question from Marcy.
I was just wondering if you could quickly go through, like when I buy something, where does that 10 cents go? And when I return it, where does the 10 cents go? And is there some incentive for retailers to want you to buy something and collect the 10 cents, but not actually return it and keep the 10 cents? Just where does it go?
That's a really good question. So as I said, first there's the handling fee, which is 2 1/4 or 3 1/4 cents, depending on whether it's return to retail or a redemption center. So those handling fees are very small, and that's what runs the system. That's what the beverage company pays for. Then what I think you're asking about, Marcy, is the 5 cent or 10 cent fee, which we're hoping will be 10 cents, but it's 5 cents now. That's the redemption fee. And it's a rebate, if you will. You purchase the soda bottle in Massachusetts right now. You pay an extra 5 cents. If you bring it back to a redemption center or to a retailer with a reverse vending machine, you get your 5 cents back. And it can be done, as Karen said, in a system where you're getting automatically credited, and it doesn't have to be very complicated. So the 5 or 10 cent fee, you're paying it, you get it back. And it's an incentive to get people to bring it back. If you don't bring it back, so that 5 cents, you don't bring it back, you put your bottle in recycling, and in the recycling system, meaning your curbside. So you're not bringing it back to a redemption center or a retailer. That 5 cents that's not coming back to you, goes to the Mass General Fund. It used to go to environmental issues specifically, but they gutted that, and it goes to the Mass General Fund. It doesn't have to go to the Mass General Fund. Like, this is one of the things, if we could craft the perfect bill, I would probably rather see that money go, for instance, not to the general fund, but to creating refill water stations, for instance, or protecting public drinking water. There's lots of good things that could be done with it. So the upside is that the legislators should realize that if we have lots more containers and we put them at 10 cents rather than 5 cents, we're going to be generating more money for the general fund, right? Even if we get to 90% redemption, there's going to be more money, probably in the tune of around $80 or $90 million a year, into the general fund, just because we'd be including so many more containers and we're going to 10 cents. That being said, what we've seen in the past, and maybe we'll see it in Massachusetts, is that the beverage companies, and this happened in Connecticut, the beverage companies and the recycling facilities would like to get a piece of this pie. And so some of the beverage companies have said, if it's not returned, we should get some of that money. Now, it's not that I particularly oppose them getting some of that money back, but I think it's important to make sure that wherever the money goes, it's not working against the system. In other words, we don't want beverage companies to not do a great job with a deposit return system, so that there's all these sheets or unclaimed deposits that they can then get hold of. You know what I mean? So right now, short answer, going to the general fund, which is fine. We'll see if there are other suggestions, but that's what's happening with the unclaimed deposits right now.
Thank you.
So we always promise to let people get off the call at 12:30 if they want to, and we're at 12:30. We'll stay a few minutes after in case people have more questions for Kirsty. I hope everyone was able to write their emails. I'm going to put in the chat actually a little toolkit that you can access if you'd like to. I'll do that in a second, and then you can share that with other people or take action on that if you wish. Just quickly, if we are Mothers Out Front Lexington, you can follow us on Facebook. You can also learn a lot about everyday things you can do to combat climate change on the town's climate actions website, which is www.energizelexington.org. And of course, we always love to hear from you, and that is our email address. I will quickly put the toolkit in the chat so that you guys can get more information if you want. Anybody want to stay and ask a few more questions? Oh, I see a
Thank you all
question.
so much. Oh, I was just going to say thank you so much for everybody for being here. You cannot underestimate how important the grassroots action is on this. And yeah, just amazing work by everybody here. And Lauren, I want to thank again, because Lauren has called the local official and sent an email to every nonprofit and done a lot of work in getting all this information here. So thank you so much, Lauren. Would not have happened without Lauren.
No, thank you to all of you. And there's so many more here that I know have been emailing and calling and doing all sorts of creative things. So it's a team effort, and we can do this. So
Yes.
Let's keep going.
Yep, and that zero waste caucus has helped a lot. I think a lot of legislators really understand this at a deeper level because of Rep. Sicolo. So thank you so much for that work, Rep.
I see another question. I don't know the name, ADEVL.
That's me. Thank you, Kirsty. You know how much I love you anyway. And
I love you too, Ann.
yeah,
That's the fun part about this work, is I get to meet all you guys, and you're
Yeah.
always the nicest people. Yeah, always the nicest.
okay, but even though I've moved out of Saugus, I know that town so well, and I'm thinking of the biggest stumbling block, and that's the 10 cents. And you know, going back to the days when we were trying to get the trash fee, you know, I always was trying to make people understand that there was no fee if you did the 1 barrel or the 2 barrels or whatever. So in the same instance here, you know, there is no increase if you just return the bottles. So I feel that that is like the stumbling block, and I don't know how to, especially in today's climate when there's so much division, I don't know how you get that across to people. You know, that the reason for the increase is to get that motivation to actually return the bottles, but they only see it as increased tax. And when you just pointed out the amount that the additional money that could potentially go to the state, it just reinforces that idea.
I think that's always going to be a problem, is that, you know, people are worried about how it's going to impact them. I would say, you know, again, I live in Sturbridge, we got to Stop and Shop up the road. If I bring my containers there as I'm going to the grocery store, I get my money right back. So again, I think the most important thing to underscore is that right now people are paying an arm and a leg for their curbside recycling and their curbside trash pickup. This is going to save everybody money. And also everybody's bothering to sort all this stuff and it's not getting recycled. So I think that understanding that bottle bill, glass, plastic, and aluminum gets recycled. We're going to have some more data on this from an organization called Reloop over the next couple of weeks. We're talking 95% of it gets recycled. Whereas the curbside, you know, bottles, where very little of it gets made into bottles again. It might get downcycled into something else, but doesn't get recycled. So you're absolutely right, Ann, that's going to always be the issue, but I think it's important to make people see the big picture. The other thing I'll say is that we've done surveys, mass produced surveys over the year, looking at costs of beer and wine, beer and soda in New Hampshire versus in Massachusetts, and there's no real difference. New Hampshire doesn't have a bottle bill, but there's no real difference. So while I talk about this fee going back and forth, there's not necessarily actually a difference between what you're going to see, you know, based on 5 to 10 cents in the actual 6-pack of beer that you buy. So, you know, in theory, it could be a change, but when I buy a 6-pack in New Hampshire, it's the same as a 6-pack in Massachusetts. They really distribute this throughout the system.
You always have the best answer. Thank you.
Well, that's all I do. So, you know, that's why.
Any other questions? Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to Kirsty and Lauren and Rep. Sicolo, even though she's just left, and all of you for showing up. You're the ones who will make a difference, and hopefully we can do this together.
I think Mary has a question. Do you have a question,
Mary has a question? Sorry, I missed that.
No,
It's
no,
okay.
kids.
No, I don't know. I was just wondering, does CLF have any actual data, you know, that, you know, where we can show that, you know, yes, your costs may go incrementally here, although you can get it back, but we're saving this much on the other side. Do you have?
We do, Mary. Great. Yeah, actually, Lauren did a fantastic infographic that shows you, Lauren, I don't know if it's easy for you to pull that up and put it in the chat. But what Lauren did, and this is a good story to tell, is spoke to, you know, she called all the cities and towns that have curbside. And I think all but 2 of the ones that got back to her. So how many was it, Lauren? Had significant increases in costs in their recycling in the last couple of years. Yeah. Lauren, you can probably tell the story better than I can.
Sure, I can share the blog in the chat. I want to say, I'm going to get the numbers wrong. I'm sorry. This has been a really long week with COVID. But I want to say at least I contacted around 150 cities and towns, which that's our estimate based off of the Mass DEP data that we have that have curbside recycling in Massachusetts, most of those being in the eastern side of the state. And I think about a little over 100, or no, sorry, a little bit over 60 of those cities and towns actually contacted me back with information. And then I think about almost half of those 60 cities and towns had some sort of what we defined as like a drastic increase. So for example, one that always stands out to me is Newton. They went, almost $1 million increase over the span of 3 years. And, I always think
That's just
about
for recycling. Yeah.
right, just your
Crazy.
recycling, and imagine in your own personal budget, if your mortgage or your rent increased that high of 50% over the span of 3 years.
Right.
So none of us would have anywhere to live anymore, so you think about how that impacts the city and town budget. Even, what else could that money have gone to? I always think about that. We're using it to haul off things that are not even ending up recycled most of the time.
Yeah.
So.
And just
Fewer things are being recycled than ever before,
that's right.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're
And-
paying a lot more and getting less actual recycling.
Yeah. And then to underscore Lauren's point, so that was half that were astronomical increases, but only I think 2 didn't have an increase. Like they all pretty much increased. They got in touch with her. And then the other piece that you might hear is that the market has rebounded some. So that number 1 and number 2 plastic are now being sold by the recycling sorting companies like Casella, for instance, and Waste Management. So they can now sell those, which they weren't able to do before. However, it's still not making up the difference. It's better. The recycling market has rebounded. The recycling market's always going to go like this. That's just the nature of it. But the thing to remember is that we need to do this so that the cities and towns don't have to worry about this tonnage at all, ever. And then, because even in good times, they're not coming out ahead. And then the other piece of this is that when you have bottle bill materials or deep sort materials, like for instance, the city of Newton has a transfer station where things are deep sorted, and Sturbridge, where I live, we have a recycling center where we can deep sort. There's always more resistance to the market. So bottle bill materials, because they're so clean and sorted, are going to be recycled at higher levels. They'll also be worth more. So that piece of it is really important.
Karen?
I just wanted to add something. I just thought of, Chrissy, when you said that the collections, the Casellas of the world are going to be against this bill. I'm with the city of Newton, or I'm on the Sustainable Materials Management Commission, and in touring the MRF several years ago, the fellow giving us the tour said he would love to have the bottle bill price increase to 10 cents. He said even a quarter, because the glass ruins their machines. When it gets ground up, it's an abrasive, and it just wrecks their machines. And he would love to see all glass get out of his machines. So
they've talked about the glass being out of it. They've talked about the glass being out of it, but the National Solid Waste Association, who represents them, and Mass Recycle, does not come out in favor of these bills. Their pieces, they'd love all the glass to go away, and I would like the glass out of the curbside system for the same reason, not only for the machines at the sorting or MRF facilities, material recycling facilities, but also because the glass screws up the value of the cardboard and paper, as Karen knows well, because Karen's really been digging into the specifics of the numbers. So that, the glass should be out of there. Unfortunately, we don't see, the company speaks as a whole, as a monolith a lot of times on this stuff. And Casella and Waste Management, after increasing the curbside recycling costs of all these cities and towns, made more money last quarter than I think they ever have, So, and also remember too, and this is one of those weird things too, there's the recycling branch of these companies that does the sorting and then sells the materials to companies that actually recycle it. That's a very small amount of the company's profits as a whole. 90%, I think it is, of Casella's profits, don't quote me on it, but it's a significantly majority of their income is from landfilling, right? That's where their bread and butter is, hauling and landfilling. Recycling is not really a big money maker for these companies. Burning and burying, because it takes so little infrastructure, makes them a shit ton of money. So sometimes even when the guy who runs the Charleston, system wants to do a great job, the company as a whole is going to say, we need everything that's in the trash to keep being in the trash.
Yeah.
But that's a really good point about the machines in the glass. You're absolutely right about the machines in the glass. The civilized countries don't put any glass in their curbside. Europe, Canada, no glass in the curbside.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you so much, everybody. I hope if
Thank
you
you.
were too mesmerized by the conversation to send your emails, that you'll do it later, as I will. And,
yeah, don't get me in trouble with Mandy for talking too much, guys.
Oh,
You gotta
no,
send
I
those
loved
emails.
it.
What you can do is just set a quick reminder in your phone or your calendar right now, so you do it later today. That's what I always do. So that's a good tool.
Great idea. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us, guys. Thank you so
everyone.
much. Great job.
Thank you for your work.
Everyone. Take care.